Na Ucrânia, é com pesar que vemos a guerra se estender sem perspectiva de paz. O Brasil condenou de maneira firme a invasão do território ucraniano. Já está claro que nenhuma das partes conseguirá atingir todos os seus objetivos pela via militar. O recurso a armamento cada vez mais destrutivo traz à memória os tempos mais sombrios do confronto estéril da Guerra Fria. Criar condições para a retomada do diálogo direto entre as partes é crucial nesse momento. Esta é a mensagem do entendimento de 6 pontos que China e Brasil oferecem para que se instale um processo de diálogo e o fim da hostilidade. Em Gaza e na Cisjordânia, assistimos a uma das maiores crises humanitárias da história recente e que agora se expande perigosamente para o Líbano. Começou como ação terrorista de fanáticos contra civis israelenses inocentes, tornou-se uma punição coletiva de todo o povo palestino. São mais de 40 mil vítimas fatais, em sua maioria mulheres e crianças. O direito de defesa transformou-se no direito de vingança, que impede um acordo para a liberação de reféns e adia o cessar-fogo. Conflitos esquecidos no Sudão e no Iêmen impõem sofrimento atroz a quase 30 milhões de pessoas. Este ano, o número dos que necessitam de ajuda humanitária no mundo chegará a 300 milhões de pessoas. Em tempos de crescente polarização, expressões como desglobalização se tornaram corriqueiras. Mas é impossível desplanetizar nossa vida em comum. Estamos condenados à interdependência da mudança climática. O planeta já não espera para cobrar da próxima geração e está farto de acordos climáticos que não são cumpridos. Está cansado de metas de redução de emissão de carbono negligenciadas do auxílio financeiro aos países pobres que nunca chega. O negacionismo sucumbe ante as evidências do aquecimento global. 2024 caminha para ser o ano mais quente da história moderna. Furacões no Caribe, tufões na Ásia, seca e inundações na África e chuvas torrenciais na Europa deixam um rastro de morte e de destruição. No sul do Brasil, tivemos a maior enchente desde 1941. A Amazônia está atravessando a pior estiagem em 45 anos. Incêndios florestais se alastraram pelo país e já devoraram 5 milhões de hectares apenas no mês de agosto. O meu governo não terceiriza a responsabilidade e nem abdica da sua soberania. Já fizemos muito, mas sabemos que é preciso fazer muito mais. Além de enfrentar os desafios da crise climática, lutamos contra quem lucra com a degradação ambiental. Não transigiremos com litígios ambientais, com o garimpe legal e com o crime organizado. Reduzimos o desmatamento na Amazônia em 50% no último ano e vamos erradicá-lo até 2030. Não é mais admissível pensar em soluções para florestas tropicais sem ouvir os povos indígenas, comunidades tradicionais e todos aqueles que vivem lá. Nossa visão de desenvolvimento sustentável está alicerçada no potencial da bioeconomia. O Brasil sediará a COP30 em 2025, convicto de que o multilateralismo é o único caminho para superar a urgência climática. Nossa contribuição nacionalmente determinada, o NDC, será apresentada ainda este ano, em linha com o objetivo de limitar o aumento da temperatura do planeta a 1,5 graus. O Brasil desponta como celeiro de oportunidades neste mundo revolucionado pela transição energética. Somos hoje um dos países com a matriz energética mais limpa do mundo. 90% da nossa eletricidade provém de fontes renováveis, como a biomassa, a hidrelétrica, a solar e a eólica. Fizemos opções transição pelos biocombustíveis há 50 anos, muito antes que a discussão sobre energias alternativas ganhasse tração. Estamos na vanguarda em outros nichos importantes, como da produção do hidrogênio verde. É hora de enfrentar o debate sobre o ritmo lento da descarbonização do planeta e trabalhar por uma economia menos dependente de combustíveis fósseis. Senhor Presidente, na América Latina, vive-se desde 2014 uma segunda década perdida. O crescimento médio da região nesse período foi de apenas 0,9%, metade do verificado na década perdida de 1990. Essa combinação de baixo crescimento e altos níveis de desigualdade resulta em efeitos nefastos sobre a paisagem política. Tragada por disputas muitas vezes alheias à região, nossa vocação de cooperação e entendimento se fragiliza. É injustificável manter Cuba em uma lista unilateral de estados que supostamente promovem terrorismo e impor medidas coercitivas unilaterais que penalizam indevidamente as populações mais vulneráveis. No Haiti, é inadiável conjugar ações para restaurar a ordem pública e promover o desenvolvimento. No Brasil, a defesa da democracia implica ação permanente anti-investidas extremistas, messiânicas e totalitárias que espalham o ódio, a intolerância e o ressentimento. Brasileiras e brasileiros continuarão a derrotar os que tentam solapar as instituições e colocá-las a serviço de interesses. A democracia precisa responder às legítimas aspirações dos que não aceitam mais a fome, a desigualdade, o desemprego e a violência. No mundo globalizado, não faz sentido recorrer a falsos patriotas e isolacionistas. Tampouco a esperança no recurso a experiências ultraliberais que apenas agravam as dificuldades de um continente depauperado. O futuro de nossa região passa, sobretudo, por construir um Estado sustentável, eficiente, inclusivo e que enfrente todas as formas de discriminação, que não se intimida ante indivíduos, corporação ou plataformas digitais que se julgam acima da lei. A liberdade é a primeira vítima de um mundo sem regras. Elementos essenciais da soberania incluem o direito de legislar, julgar disputas e fazer cumprir as regras dentro do seu território, incluindo o ambiente digital. O Estado que estamos construindo é sensível às necessidades dos mais vulneráveis, sem abdicar de fundamentos macroeconômicos. A falsa oposição entre o Estado e mercado foi abandonada pelas nações desenvolvidas que voltaram a praticar políticas industriais ativas e forte regulação da economia doméstica. Na área de negligência da inteligência artificial, vivenciamos a consolidação de assimetrias que levam a um verdadeiro oligopólio do saber. Avança a concentração sem precedentes na mão de pequeno número de pessoas e de empresas sediadas em um número ainda menor de países. Interessa-nos uma inteligência artificial emancipadora, que também tenha a cara do sul global e que fortaleça a diversidade cultural, que respeite os direitos humanos, proteja dados pessoais e promova a integridade da informação. E, sobretudo, que seja ferramenta para a paz, não para a guerra. Necessitamos de uma governança intergovernamental da inteligência artificial, em que todos os Estados tenham acesso. Senhor Presidente, as condições para acesso a recursos financeiros seguem proibitivas para a maioria dos países de renda baixa e média. O fardo da dívida limita o espaço fiscal para investir em saúde e educação, reduzir as desigualdades e enfrentar a mudança climática. Países da África tomam empréstimo a taxas até 8 vezes maiores que a Alemanha e 4 vezes maior do que os Estados Unidos. É um plano Marshall às avessas, em que os mais pobres financiam os mais ricos. Sem maior participação dos países em desenvolvimento na direção do FMI e do Banco Mundial, não haverá mudança efetiva. Enquanto os Objetivos do Desenvolvimento Sustentável ficam para trás, as 150 maiores empresas do mundo obtiveram juntas um lucro de $1 trilhão e 800 bilhões de dólares nos últimos 2 anos. A fortuna dos 5 principais bilionários mais que dobrou desde o início dessa década, ao passo que 60% da humanidade ficou mais pobre. Os super-ricos pagam proporcionalmente muito menos impostos do que a classe trabalhadora. Para corrigir essa anomalia, o Brasil tem insistido na cooperação internacional para desenvolver padrões mínimos de tributação global. Os dados divulgados há 2 meses pela FAO sobre o estado da insegurança alimentar no mundo são estarrecedores. O número de pessoas passando fome ao redor do planeta aumentou em mais de 152 milhões desde 2019. Isso significa que 9% da população mundial, 733 milhões de pessoas, estão subnutridas. O problema é especialmente grave na África, mas ele também persiste em partes da América Latina. Mulheres e meninas são as maiores, são as vítimas maiores de pessoas em situação de fome. Pandemia, conflitos armados, eventos climáticos e subsídios agrícolas dos países ricos ampliam o alcance desse flagelo. Mas a fome não é resultado apenas de fatores externos. Ela decorre sobretudo de escolhas políticas. Hoje, o mundo produz alimentos mais do que suficiente para erradicar. O que falta é criar condições de acesso ao alimento. Esse é o compromisso mais urgente do meu governo. Acabar com a fome no Brasil, como fizemos em 2014. Só em 2023, retiramos 24 milhões e 400 mil pessoas da condição de insegurança severa. A Aliança Global contra a Fome e a Pobreza, que lançaremos no Rio de Janeiro em novembro, nasce dessa vontade política e desse espírito de solidariedade. Ela será um dos principais resultados da presidência brasileira do G20 e está aberta a todos os países do mundo. Todos os que queiram se somar a este esforço coletivo serão muito bem-vindos. Senhor Presidente, senhoras e senhores, prestes a completar 80 anos, a Carta das Nações Unidas nunca passou por uma reforma urgente. Apenas 4 emendas foram aprovadas, todas elas entre 1965 e 1973. A versão atual da Carta não trata de alguns dos desafios mais prementes da humanidade. Na fundação da ONU, éramos 51 países. Hoje, somos 193. Várias nações, principalmente no continente africano, estavam sob domínio colonial e não tiveram voz sobre seus objetivos e funcionamento. Inexiste equilíbrio de gênero no exercício das mais altas funções. O cargo de secretário-geral jamais foi ocupado por uma mulher. Estamos chegando ao final do primeiro quarto do século XXI, com as Nações Unidas cada vez mais esvaziadas e paralisadas. É hora de reagir com vigor a essa situação, restituindo à organização as prerrogativas que decorrem da sua condição de Fórum Universal. Não bastam ajustes pontuais. Precisamos contemplar uma ampla revisão da Carta. Sua reforma deve compreender os seguintes objetivos: a transformação do Conselho Econômico e Social no principal fórum para o tratamento do desenvolvimento sustentável e do combate à mudança climática, com capacidade real de inspirar as instituições financeiras. A revitalização do papel da Assembleia Geral, inclusive em temas de paz e segurança internacionais. O fortalecimento da Comissão de Consolidação da Paz. A reforma do Conselho de Segurança, conforme foca em sua composição, método de trabalho, direito de veto, de modo a torná-la mais eficaz e representativa da realidade contemporânea. A exclusão da América Latina e da África de assentos permanentes no Conselho de Segurança é um eco inaceitável de práticas de dominação do passado colonial. Vamos promover essa discussão de forma transparente.
Let's promote this discussion in a transparent way.
Vamos promover essa discussão de forma transparente, em consulta no G77, no G20, nos BRICS, na CELAC, no CARICOM e em tantos outros espaços que existem para discutir. Não tem ilusões sobre a complexidade de uma reforma como essa, que enfrentará interesses cristalizados de manutenção do status quo. Exigirá enorme esforço de negociação, mas essa é a nossa responsabilidade. Não podemos esperar por outra tragédia mundial, como a Segunda Grande Guerra, para só então construir sobre seus escombros uma nova governança global. A vontade da maioria pode persuadir os que se apegam às expressões cruas dos mecanismos do poder. Neste plenário, eu como as aspirações de toda a humanidade. Aqui, travamos os grandes debates do mundo. Neste fórum, buscamos as respostas para os problemas que afligem o planeta. Recai sobre a Assembleia Geral, expressão maior do multilateralismo, a missão de pavimentar o caminho para o futuro. Muito obrigado e boa sorte.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Federative Republic of Brazil, so they're checking a few things before he's here. But I think they're checking a few things. I don't know. Just driving another minute. Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Joseph R. Biden, Jr., President of the United States of America. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
My fellow leaders, today is the fourth time I've had the great honor of speaking to this assembly as President of the United States. It'll be my last. I've seen a remarkable sweep of history. I was first elected to office in the United States of America as a U.S. Senator in 1972. Now, I know I look like I'm only 40. I know that. I was 29 years old. Back then, we were living through an inflection point, a moment of tension and uncertainty. The world was divided by the Cold War. The Middle East was headed toward war. America was at war in Vietnam. At that point, the longest war in America's history. Our country was divided and angry, and there were questions about our staying power and our future. But even then, I entered public life not out of despair, but out of optimism. The United States and the world got through that moment. It wasn't easy or simple, without significant setbacks. But we go on to reduce the threat of nuclear weapons through arms control, and then go on to bring the Cold War itself to an end. Israel and Egypt went to war, but then forged a historic peace. We ended the war in Vietnam. The last year in Hanoi, I met with the Vietnamese leadership. We elevated our partnership to the highest level. It's a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the capacity for reconciliation. That today the United States and Vietnam are partners and friends. And it's proof that even from the horrors of war, there's a way forward. Things can get better. We should never forget that. I've seen that throughout my career. In the 1980s, I spoke out against apartheid in South Africa. And then I watched the racist regime fall. In the 1990s, I worked to hold Milosevic accountable for war crimes. He was held accountable. At home, I wrote and passed the Violence Against Women Act to end the scourge of violence against women and girls, not only in America, but across the world, as many of you have as well. But we have so much more to do, especially against rape and sexual violence as weapons of war and terror. We were attacked on 9/11 by al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden. We brought him justice. Then I came to the presidency at another moment of crisis and uncertainty. I believed America had to look forward. New challenges, new threats, new opportunities were in front of us. We need to put ourselves in a position to see the threats, to deal with the challenges, and to seize the opportunities as well. We need to end the era of war that began on 9/11. As Vice President to President Obama, he asked me to work to wind down the military operations in Iraq and we did, painful as it was. When I came to office as president, Afghanistan had replaced Vietnam as America's longest war. I was determined to end it, and I did. It was a hard decision, but the right decision. 4 American presidents had faced that decision, but I was determined not to leave it to the 5th. It was a decision accompanied by tragedy. 13 brave Americans lost their lives, along with hundreds of Afghans in a suicide bomb. I think those lost lives, I think of them every day. I think of all the 2,461 U.S. military deaths over a long 20 years of that war. 20,744 American servicemen wounded in action. I think of their service, their sacrifice, and their heroism. I know other countries lost their own men and women fighting alongside us. We honor their sacrifices as well. To face the future, I was also determined to rebuild my country's alliances and partnerships to a level not previously seen. We did just that, from traditional treaty alliances to new partnerships like the Quad with the United States, Japan, Australia, and India. I know many look at the world today and see difficulties and react with despair, but I do not. I won't. As leaders, we don't have the luxury. I recognize the challenges from Ukraine to Gaza to Sudan and beyond. War, hunger, terrorism, brutality, record displacement of people, a climate crisis, democracy at risk, strains within our societies, the promise of artificial intelligence and its significant risk. The list goes on. But maybe because all I've seen and all we have done together over the decades, I have hope. I know there is a way forward. In 1919, the Irish poet William Butler Yeats described a world, and I quote, "where things fall apart, the center cannot hold, mere anarchy is loosed upon the world," end of quote. Some may say those words describe the world not just in 1919, but in 2024. But I see a critical distinction. In our time, the center has held. Leaders and people from every region and across the political spectrum have stood together, turned the page. We turned the page in the worst pandemic in a century. We made sure COVID no longer controls our lives. We defended the UN Charter and ensured the survival of Ukraine as a free nation. My country made the largest investment in climate, clean energy, ever anywhere in history. There will always be forces that pull our countries apart and the world apart. Aggression, extremism, chaos, and cynicism. A desire to retreat from the world and go it alone. Our test is to make sure that the forces holding us together are stronger than those who are pulling us apart. That the principles of partnership that we came here each year to uphold can withstand the challenges. That the center holds once again. My fellow leaders, I truly believe we're at another inflection point in world history, where the choices we make today will determine our future for decades to come. Will we stand behind the principles that unite us? Will we stand firm against aggression? Will we end the conflicts that are raging today? Will we take on global challenges like climate change, hunger, and disease? Will we plan now for the opportunities and risk of a revolutionary new technologies? I want to talk today about each of these decisions and the actions, in my view, we must take. To start, each of us in this body has made a commitment to the principles of the UN Charter to stand up against aggression. When Russia invaded Ukraine, we could have stood by and merely protested. But Vice President Harris and I understood that that was an assault on everything this institution was supposed to stand for. And so, my direction, America stepped into the breach, providing massive security and economic and humanitarian assistance. Our NATO allies and partners in 50-plus nations stood up as well. But most importantly, the Ukrainian people stood up. I asked the people of this chamber to stand up for them. The good news is Putin's war has failed and at his core aim. He set out to destroy Ukraine, but Ukraine is still free. He set out to weaken NATO, but NATO is bigger, stronger, more united than ever before, with 2 new members, Finland and Sweden. But we cannot let up. The world now has another choice to make. Will we sustain our support to help Ukraine win this war and preserve its freedom, or walk away and let aggression be renewed and a nation be destroyed? I know my answer. We cannot grow weary. We cannot look away. And we will not let up on our support for Ukraine, not until Ukraine wins a just and durable peace in the UN Charter. We also need to uphold our principles as we seek to responsibly manage the competition with China so it does not veer into conflict. We stand ready to cooperate on urgent challenges for the good of our people and the people everywhere. We recently resumed cooperation with China to stop the flow of deadly synthetic narcotics. I appreciate the collaboration. It matters for the people of my country and many others around the world. On matters of conviction, the United States is unabashed, pushing back against unfair economic competition, against military coercion of other nations and in the South China Sea, in maintaining peace and stability across the Taiwan Straits, in protecting our most advanced technologies so they cannot be used against us or any of our partners. At the same time, we're going to continue to strengthen our network of alliances and partnerships across the Indo-Pacific. These partnerships are not against any nation. They're building blocks for a free, open, secure, and peaceful Indo-Pacific. We're also working to bring greater measure of peace and stability in the Middle East. The world must not flinch from the horrors of October 7th. Any country would have the right and responsibility to ensure that such an attack can never happen again. Thousands of armed Hamas terrorists invaded a sovereign state, slaughtering and massacring more than 1,200 people, including 46 Americans, in their homes and at a music festival. Despicable acts of sexual violence, 250 innocents taken hostage. I've met with the families of those hostages. I've grieved with them. They're going through hell. Innocent civilians in Gaza are also going through hell. Thousands and thousands killed, including aid workers. Too many families dislocated, crowding into tents, facing a dire humanitarian situation. They did not ask for this war that Hamas started. I put forward with Qatar and Egypt a ceasefire and hostage deal. It's been endorsed by the UN Security Council. Now is the time for the parties to finalize its terms, bring the hostages home, and secure security for Israel and Gaza free of Hamas' grip, ease the suffering in Gaza, and end this war. On October 7th, since October 7th, we've also been determined to prevent a wider war that engulfs the entire region. Hezbollah, unprovoked, during the October 7th attack, launching rockets into Israel. Almost a year later, too many on each side of the Israeli-Lebanon border remain displaced. Full-scale war is not in anyone's interest. Even if the situation has escalated, a diplomatic solution is still possible. In fact, it remains the only path to lasting security to allow the residents from both countries to return to their homes and the border safely. And that's what we're working tirelessly to achieve. As we look ahead, we must also address the rise of violence against innocent Palestinians on the West Bank and set the conditions for a better future, including a two-state solution where the world where Israel enjoys security and peace and full recognition and normalized relations with all its neighbors, where Palestinians live in security, dignity, and self-determination in a state of their own. Progress toward peace will put us in a stronger position to deal with the ongoing threat posed by Iran. Together we must deny oxygen to its terrorist proxies, which have called for more October 7th and ensure that Iran will never, ever obtain a nuclear weapon. Gaza is not the only conflict that deserves our outrage. In Sudan, a bloody civil war unleashed one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. 8 million on the brink of famine. Hundreds of thousands already there. Atrocities in Darfur and elsewhere. The United States has led the world in providing humanitarian aid to Sudan. And with our partners, we've led diplomatic talks to try to silence the guns and avert a wider famine. The world needs to stop arming the generals, to speak with one voice and tell them, stop tearing your country apart, stop blocking aid to the Sudanese people, end this war now. But people need more than the absence of war. They need a chance to live in dignity. They need to be protected from the ravages of climate change, hunger, and disease. Our administration has invested over $150 billion to make progress and other sustainable development goals. It includes $20 billion for food security, over $50 billion for global health. We've mobilized billions more in private sector investment. We've taken the most ambitious climate action in history. We've moved to rejoin the Paris Agreement on day one. And today, my country is finally on track to cut emissions in half by 2030. On track to honor my pledge to quadruple climate financing to developing nations with $11 billion thus far this year. We've rejoined the World Health Organization, donating nearly 700 million doses of COVID vaccine to 117 countries. We must now move quickly to face Mpox outbreak in Africa. We're prepared to commit $500 million to help African countries prevent and respond to Mpox and to donate 1 million doses of Mpox vaccine now. We call on our partners to match our pledge and make this a billion-dollar commitment to the people of Africa. Beyond the core necessities of food and health, the United States, the G7, and our partners have embarked on an ambitious initiative to mobilize and deliver significant finance to the developing world. We're working to help countries build out their infrastructure, to clean energy transition, to the digital transformation, to lay new economic foundations for a prosperous future. It's called the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment. We've already started to see the fruits of this emerge in Southern Africa and Southeast Asia and in the Americas. We have to keep it going. I want to get things done together. In order to do that, we must build a stronger, more effective, and more inclusive United Nations. The UN needs to adapt and bring new voices and new perspectives. That's why we support reforming and expanding the membership of the UN Security Council. My UN ambassador just laid out our detailed vision to reflect today's world, not yesterday's. It's time to move forward. The Security Council, like the UN itself, needs to go back to the job of making peace, of brokering deals to end wars and suffering. And to stop the spread of the most dangerous weapons, of stabilizing troubled regions in East Africa, from East Africa to Haiti, to Kenya-led mission that's working alongside the Haitian people to turn the tide. We also have a responsibility to prepare our citizens for the future. We'll see more technological change, I argue, in the next 2 to 10 years than we have in the last 50 years. Artificial intelligence is going to change our ways of life, our ways of work, and our ways of war. It could usher in scientific progress at a pace never seen before, and much of it could make our lives better. But AI also brings profound risks, from deep fakes to disinformation, to novel pathogens, to bioweapons. We've worked at home and abroad to define the new norms and standards. This year, we achieved the first ever General Assembly resolution on AI to start developing global rules of the road. We also announced a declaration on the responsible use of AI, joined by 60 countries in this chamber. But let's be honest, this is just the tip of the iceberg, what we need to do to manage this new technology. Nothing is certain about how AI will evolve or how it will be deployed. No one knows all the answers. My fellow leaders, it's with humility I offer two questions. First, how do we as an international community govern AI? As countries and companies race to uncertain frontiers, we need an equally urgent effort to ensure AI's safety, security, and trustworthiness. As AI grows more powerful, it must grow more responsive to our collective needs and values. Benefits of all must be shared equitably. It should be harnessed to narrow, not deepen, digital divides. Second, will we ensure that AI supports rather than undermines the core principles that human life has value and all humans deserve dignity? We must make certain that the awesome capabilities of AI will be used to uplift and empower everyday people, not to give dictators more powerful shackles on the human spirit. In the years ahead, there may well be no greater test of our leadership than how we deal with AI. Let me close with this. Even as we navigate so much change, one thing must not change. We must never forget who we're here to represent. We, the people. These are the first words of our Constitution, the very idea of America. They inspired the opening words of the UN Charter. I made the preservation of democracy the central cause of my presidency. This summer, I faced a decision whether to seek a second term as president. It was a difficult decision. Being president has been the honor of my life. There's so much more I want to get done. As much as I love the job, I love my country more. I decided after 50 years of public service, it's time for a new generation of leadership to take my nation forward. My fellow leaders, let us never forget, some things are more important than staying in power. It's your people. It's your people that matter the most. Never forget, we are here to serve the people, not the other way around. Because the future will be won by those who unleash the full potential of their people, to breathe free, to think freely, to innovate, to educate, to live and love openly without fear. That's the soul of democracy. It does not belong to any one country. I've seen it all around the world, in the brave men and women who ended apartheid, brought down the Berlin Wall, fight today for freedom and justice and dignity. We saw it, that universal yearning for rights and freedom in Venezuela, where millions cast their vote for change that hadn't been recognized. But it can't be denied. The world knows the truth. We saw in Uganda LGBT activists demanding safety and recognition of their common humanity. We see in citizens across the world peacefully choosing their future. From Ghana to India to South Korea, nations representing 1/4 of humanity who will hold elections this year alone. It's remarkable, the power of we the people, that makes me more optimistic about the future than I've ever been. Since I was first elected to the United States Senate in 1972, every age faces its challenges. I saw it as a young man. I see it today. But we are stronger than we think. We're stronger together than alone. And what the people call impossible is just an illusion. Nelson Mandela taught us, and I quote, "It always seems impossible until it's done." It always seems impossible until it's done. My fellow leaders, there's nothing that's beyond our capacity if we work together. Let's work together. God bless you all, and may God protect all those who seek peace. Thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the United States of America. May I request representatives to remain seated while we suspend the meeting for 5 minutes before resuming to hear the next speaker.